The door came in at 5:02. Two deputies, one shoulder each, one breath, one boot. The lock gave. A flashlight crossed my face. A voice said my name. 5 hours earlier, my husband had walked me into this garage with one hand around my wrist and the other in his coat pocket. He did not speak in the kitchen. He did not speak in the mudroom. At the threshold, he stopped, looked at me the way a man looks at a chair. He is moving out of a room and said, "Only this. Guests arrive at noon. Don't embarrass me tomorrow." The door closed. The lock turned. His footsteps walked back to my kitchen, where another woman was waiting. I did not scream. I sat down on the concrete and opened my notebook. The flashlight moved off my face. A second beam crossed the workbench. A radio crackled. A woman in a navy coat knelt beside me and unfolded a foil blanket and said her name was Deputy Reeves and asked me if I knew what day it was. I said it was Tuesday. She said it was Wednesday. The workbench clock had stopped at 1:19 when the battery gave up. She said, "Come with me, ma'am." She helped me stand. My ankle was wrapped in an oil rag I had taken from the floor. My hands were inside the gloves I had found in the glove compartment. The cardigan had not done anything for 5 hours and was not doing anything now. She held my elbow. We walked back into the kitchen. The kitchen was full of men. 2 more deputies, a paramedic with a bag, a man in a long coat who turned out to be the duty sergeant. They had Daniel against the island. His hands were behind him. The cuffs were already on. He was wearing the cashmere sweater I had given him for his birthday. On the chair behind him, a folded pair of pajamas waited. He had laid them out for the morning he meant to discover my body. He looked at me when I came through the door, and his face did the thing I had been waiting 10 years to see. Half a second. He had been a man who was about to win something, and he had just learned that he had not. He looked down at the granite. He did not look up again. Lily was on the bench by the bay window. She was wearing my robe. She was holding a teacup. The teacup was empty. The wineglass on the counter beside her was full and untouched. The deputy beside her had not yet read her anything because nobody had yet decided what to charge her with. She looked at me and her mouth opened, and I walked past her without slowing down. Reeves opened the back door for me. The cold outside was the same cold as inside the garage. I noticed that I noticed it. Daniel finally spoke. He said, "Helen, please." The duty sergeant put a hand on his shoulder. I said one word as I passed him. I said, "Documented." Then I walked out of my house. Reeves told me later that the duty sergeant had pulled an emergency contact card out of my wallet at the scene and called my sister at 4 in the morning. By 8, Joanne would be in the chair beside my hospital bed. I would not have to ask. By the time I had been at Eastern Maine Medical for 2 hours, the detective at my bedside had read every page of my notebook twice. He closed the cover and said, "This is going to put him away for the rest of his life." I said, "No, it is not. He has done this before. Look up the name Sarah." The detective wrote the name on a card and walked out of the room. At 11:43, I had been hitting the door for 23 counts. I had been calling Daniel's name. I stopped because each breath was warm and I did not have warm breath to spend. I sat down. I climbed onto the Subaru hood and reached up to the garage door rail and felt for the manual release cord. The handle was missing. The cord was missing. I ran my finger across the link where it had been. The cut was clean. It was a wire cutter cut. It had not frayed. He had cleaned the garage 2 weeks earlier. He had told me it was for organization. He had emptied the tool drawer of anything I could use. He had taken the spare lighter from the wood stove. He had taken the jumper cables. He had taken everything a person could use to start a fire or break a window or signal a road. I wrapped myself in 4 moving blankets I found under the workbench. I pulled work gloves from the glove compartment of the car. I counted my pulse and my breaths in 4s and 7s and 8s, a technique from a Navy diver book I had checked out for a patron once. I did not scream. Screaming would burn calories I could not afford. The garage door met the threshold with a 1/4-inch gap. I lay on my stomach and looked through it. I could see one corner of the kitchen. I could see Lily walk past 3 times. The first time she opened the wine. The wine was a Brunello from 2018. I had bought it for my husband for our 8th anniversary. He had never opened it. He had said he was saving it for something special. The second time she walked past, she carried the glass to the sink and poured the wine down the drain. She came back a minute later with a teacup. The third time she walked past, she ate 1 cracker from the cheese tray. She picked up a second cracker. She put it back. She paused at the island and put her hand on her lower stomach. 2 beats. The kind of motion a woman makes when she is checking to see if anything has changed since the last time she checked. 4 minutes later, she did it again. I added the 3 observations together. I wrote pregnant in my notebook with a question mark. Then Daniel walked into the frame. He put one hand on her hip and kissed the place on her shoulder where the robe had slipped and said the words smoothly out loud to no one. They were not afraid. He thought I was dying. He thought this was over. I wrote down 47 entries over 5 hours and 19 minutes. I wrote down the times she walked past and the times he walked past and the times they laughed and the time he kissed her and the time he said smoothly. I did not write because I thought I would survive. I wrote because I had been a librarian for 12 years, and I was not going to let the only record of his crime die in the cold with me. The detective came back to my hospital room at 11 in the morning. He had a name written on the card now. He said the name was Sarah Marsh. He said she had died in a garage in Camden in 2013. He said, Helen, you were right. The doctor came in at 11:45. She stood at the foot of my bed and said 3 things. You are stage 2 frostbite. 3 toes left foot, 2 fingers left hand. Moderate hypothermia, core temperature 92, when admitted. We need to keep you 48 hours minimum. You are not making this decision rationally. I said 3 things back. I am rational. I am leaving. Bring the form. She brought the form. 3 pages. I signed each one. She said you may lose those toes. I said I understand. Reeves came in at noon with a man in a charcoal suit. He introduced himself as Jim Cole, the assistant district attorney for Knox County. He sat in the second chair without being asked. He had a folder. He said, Mrs. Marsh, your husband is looking at aggravated assault, false imprisonment, attempted manslaughter. His attorney will offer a plea by tomorrow morning. Standard for a first offense, no priors. 5 to 8 years? I said no plea. Trial. He said, Mrs. Marsh, this could take 8 to 14 months. You will testify. You will be cross-examined. I said no plea. He looked at Reeves. Reeves nodded once. Cole wrote something on the folder. He said, all right. The forensic team has been at your house since 6 this morning. They opened the safe. We need you to confirm a date. His radio did not crackle. The phone in his pocket did. He read the message and turned to me with a different face than the one he had walked in with. He said, can I ask if you and your husband had plans to travel in February? I said no. He said, can you confirm you do not own property in the Caribbean? I said we do not. He said, all right. I will come back this afternoon at the substation. By 1 in the afternoon they discharged me with a sheet of instructions. Joanne drove me to the Knox County substation. Reeves was waiting at the front desk. She took us back to a small room with a table and slid a manila folder across the wood. Inside were 5 photographs. 2 airline tickets. Boston Logan to St. Lucia. One way. Departing the 28th of February. Names printed on each. Daniel Marsh. Lily Vance. A real estate purchase agreement for a 4-bedroom villa in Castries, signed by Daniel as trustee for an unnamed buyer. A wire transfer record. $480,000 sent to a bank in St. Lucia on the 22nd of December. And the 5th photograph. The 5th photograph was a draft obituary. For me. Dated the 11th of February. Saved on his office computer 7 days before he locked the garage door. I picked up Reeves's pen. I opened my notebook to a fresh page. I wrote 3 lines. He did not improvise. February 11th. He has been planning this for longer than 3 weeks. I underlined the 3rd line twice. I closed the notebook and slid it across the table. I said I want to see him in the jail tomorrow. Reeves said I will arrange it through Cole. He can grant emergency victim clearance. Joanne drove me out of the substation at 2:15. Snow had started again on the windshield. She pulled into a parking space at the side of the building to let it warm before she put it in gear. A pickup truck idled 2 spaces over. The driver got out, mid-30s, Carhartt jacket, beard. He walked over slowly with his hands visible. He stopped 6 feet from Joanne's window. Joanne lowered the glass. He said, Sister of Mrs. Marsh. Joanne said, I am. He said, my name is Mark Vance. My wife was the woman in your sister's house last night. I made the first call to 911 at 4:48. I have video, 2 angles. The footage is already with the prosecutor's office. I am not asking to come over. I just wanted you to know that when she is ready to talk, I have everything she needs. He held a business card across the window. Belfast Central Maine Power. Field engineer. A cell number written on the back in pencil. I leaned across my sister. I said, Mr. Vance. He said, ma'am. I said, you knew. He said, I have known about the affair for 6 months. I did not know about last night until 4:30 this morning. I am sorry. I said you will hear from me. He nodded once. He walked back to his truck. He did not look back. Joanne started the engine. She drove me home. I slept 4 hours on the living room couch because I could not yet bring myself to sleep upstairs. At 7, I sat up. Joanne was in the opposite chair with tea ready. I opened the notebook to a new page. I wrote one new line. He has been planning this for longer than 3 weeks. He has been planning this for longer than 3 years. I knew because of one face he made when he saw me passing through my own kitchen. He was not afraid I would live. He was afraid I would remember Sarah. The jail visitation room on the 2nd floor of the Knox County Sheriff's Department was painted the color of cooling oatmeal, 2 folding chairs, 1 steel partition, a pane of reinforced glass, 2 phone receivers, 1 on each side. The clerk at the front desk had stamped my visitor pass at 8:53. Joanne sat in the lobby downstairs. She had argued with me about coming up. I told her I was not going to argue at 8:53 in the morning about who was going to watch me look at my husband through glass. She let it go. A door on Daniel's side opened. He came in with a guard at his elbow. Jail orange, no belt, no laces. His hair was uncombed. His face had the chalk skin of a man who had not slept in 36 hours. He sat down opposite me. He looked at the receiver before he looked at me. He picked it up. I picked up mine. He said, "Helen, I am so sorry. I said, "How long?" He said, "Sorry." I said, "How long planning to kill me?" "Don't say a number you'll defend in court, just for me." Once. Margaret confirmed there is no recording on my side. He paused. The pause was not for show. He was calculating whether to lie. I watched him decide. He said 2 years. I said, "And the vitamins." He said 6 months. I said, "And Sarah." His face froze. The freeze lasted half a second. Then he repaired it. He had been repairing his face in front of me for 10 years. I had been the only person in the world who could not see it. He said, "Who?" I said it the way I had not said anything in 10 years. 1 sentence. No commas, because commas would have given him a place to interrupt. I said, "I do not know who Sarah is, and I do not know why your face just did what it did. But I am going to find out, and when I do, I am going to give the prosecutor every page of every notebook, every photograph, every account, every receipt, every wire transfer, every prescription bottle, and every sentence you ever said to me at a dinner table, and you will not see 22 years. You will see the rest of your life, and the only thing I want from you this morning is for you to know this is not happening to you. It is happening because of you. And there is no version of this where you are the smartest person in any room ever again." He stared at me. His mouth opened once. He closed it. I said, "Goodbye, Daniel." I hung up the phone. I stood up. I walked to the door. The guard on his side was already pulling him back from the partition. I heard him strike the receiver against the glass once before the door closed behind me. In the hall, Reeves was waiting. She had a coffee in each hand and gave one to me without asking what I took in it. "Black," she said, "Mrs. Marsh." "Who is Sarah?" I said, "I don't know yet, but he does. Look up the name. Anywhere. Any year." She said I did. "Last night." Sarah Marsh, born Carlton, married him in 2009, died in a garage in Camden in 2013. The original report said sleeping pills and self-harm. The detective on the case died in 2018. The case has been closed for 13 years. I said, "Open it." She said, "We filed the paperwork at 6 this morning." Margaret Wilcox's office occupied the 2nd floor above a hardware store on Main Street. A window faced the harbor. The wallpaper was older than I was. She had refused to renovate for 20 years because clients trusted a lawyer whose office did not look like a startup. I sat in the chair across from her desk. Joanne sat in the chair against the wall. Margaret slid 2 documents across the wood. She said, "I have been waiting since yesterday to put these in front of you. Read them in this order." The first was a toxicology screen. A laboratory in Bangor had run a hair sample taken from me at the hospital. 2 lines were highlighted in yellow. Trace clonazepam metabolites. 6-month exposure. Cumulative. Trace digoxin. Subtherapeutic dose. 6-month exposure. Cumulative. Margaret said clonazepam slows you down. Mental fog. Easier to manipulate. Digoxin in a subtherapeutic dose causes fatigue, occasional dizziness. Weak pulse. Both consistent with a victim who needs to be tired. To go to sleep easily. In a cold room. I reached into my purse and pulled out the bottle of multivitamins he had bought me at Hannaford in August. Better quality, he had said. The store brand has a recall. I set the bottle on the desk between us. Margaret said, "Do not open it. I will have it tested." If it matches, I said it will match. She said he has been killing you slowly for 6 months. I picked up Margaret's coffee mug from her desk and took a sip without asking. It was colder than the coffee Reeves had handed me at the jail. I set it back down. Margaret slid the second document across. She said this came in this morning. The forensic accountant pulled records from State Farm yesterday afternoon. It was an insurance policy upgrade form. His signature, date stamped the 18th of January. Margaret said 3 weeks before the incident he called State Farm. He upgraded your life insurance from $400,000 to $2.4 million. Universal life, a new beneficiary structure, an irrevocable trust naming him sole trustee. He paid the upgrade premium in cash. I picked up the mug again. I held it. I did not drink. I said, how much was the premium? Margaret said $11,400. I said in cash. She said in cash. There was a beat. The radiator under the window ticked once. I said, Margaret, he has been killing me slowly for 6 months, and he made sure he would be paid $2.4 million when I died. The premium was $11,400, and he paid it in cash so I would never see a withdrawal in any account we shared. Margaret said that is correct. I said, file the divorce petition Monday. Start the civil case parallel to criminal. I want every account, every property, every retirement asset frozen by end of the week. I want a forensic accountant on Marsh and Cole's books by Wednesday. And call the attorney for Catherine Carlton in Bennington, Vermont before Friday. Sarah's sister deserves to know. Margaret wrote each item on a yellow pad without looking up. When she finished, she said, anything else? I said yes. Tell me one thing as my lawyer and not as my friend. If everything we have walks into a courtroom tomorrow, can he survive it? She set the pen down. She said no. Marsh and Cole Property Group occupied the second floor of a converted bank building on Main Street in Bangor. The reception desk was empty. A handwritten sign on the door said, BY appointment only. I knocked. The door opened on the second knock. Cole stood in the doorway looking like a man who had not slept since the arrest. He said, Helen, I was going to call you tomorrow. I said you will not need to. He stepped aside. He led me to the conference room at the end of the hall. He closed the blinds. He shut the door. He sat across from me with a laptop open between us. He said, I have been going through Daniel's accounts since the hour they arrested him. I called the forensic accountant Margaret recommended. He got here at 6 the next morning. We worked 19-hour days for 5 days. We finished an hour ago. He turned the laptop. 3 columns, 3 client trust accounts. Daniel's signature was the only authorized signature on each one. The columns showed withdrawals over 14 months. Each withdrawal was small enough not to trigger an automatic flag. The total at the bottom of the third column was $612,000. Cole said $480,000 of that is the wire transfer to St. Lucia in December. The other $132,000 is still untraceable. I said, who are the clients? He said 3 estate accounts, 2 retired widows in Bar Harbor, 1 trust for a disabled adult son in Camden. I closed my eyes once. I opened them. I said, when do you tell them? He said, Monday morning. The firm is going to face a malpractice suit. We may not survive. I said, how much is yours? He said, all of it. I am the only other partner. The clients will come at me first. I said, send everything you have to Jim Cole at the district attorney's office by tomorrow morning. The embezzlement is its own felony. It will stack on the murder charges. He will not plea his way out of any of it. And ask Cole for an immunity letter for cooperation. Margaret will help you draft the request. Cole said you came over here to tell me to do that. I said I came over here to tell you that you are not alone. He used both of us. The way he used everyone. Cooperate. The widows in Bar Harbor will get their money back when the civil judgment is enforced, and the firm liquidated. So will the disabled adult in Camden. You will lose the firm. You will not lose your license. Cole sat back. He looked at the laptop without seeing it. He said, Helen, I am sorry. I said, I know you are. I am sorry too. I stood up. He walked me to the front door. At the threshold he stopped. He said, did you know? About Daniel. Before. I said I knew something was wrong. I did not know what. I am a librarian. I had every receipt and I missed the only thing that mattered. I am working on forgiving myself for that. It will take longer than the trial. He nodded. He closed the door behind me. It was Sunday evening. I had not turned on the television since the morning of the breach. I was sitting at the kitchen table with the Moleskine open to a fresh page when the phone rang. The number was Vermont. I picked up. A voice said, Mrs. Marsh. My name is Catherine Carlton. Sheriff Reeves contacted me yesterday. Sarah Carlton Marsh was my sister. He killed her in 2013 and we never knew. I sat down. She said they told me she committed suicide. She was depressed. She had been on sleeping pills. They found her in the garage. The detective said it was self-harm. I never believed it. I told them to look closer. They said the case was closed. The detective on it died in 2018. I have been carrying this for 13 years. I said, Catherine, I am so sorry. I am going to tell you something. I survived what your sister did not. The same kind of garage, the same kind of cold, the same kind of man. I have evidence. The reopening starts tomorrow. There was a long silence. I heard her breathe. She said, thank you. Thank you for being alive. I said thank you for never believing it. We spoke for 43 minutes. I took notes on the Moleskine without looking at the page. When I hung up, I closed the cover and laid it flat on the table. Joanne came in from the living room. She set a mug of tea beside the notebook. She did not ask who had called. She had heard enough through the wall. I said, Sarah's sister has been waiting 13 years. Joanne said, then we don't keep her waiting any longer. I said, no. Tomorrow we begin. She stood on the porch the way a person stands when she has not decided whether to ring the bell. Coat open. No hat. The wind off the harbor was still doing winter work. Snow was on her shoulders and on the welcome mat I had put down 9 years ago when we first moved in. I saw her through the side window of the foyer before she saw me. Her hand was on her stomach. The motion was different than it had been through the crack in the garage door. She was no longer checking. She was holding. I did not open the door. I spoke through it. I said, why are you here? She said, I am pregnant. It is Daniel's. I thought you should hear it from me. I said, get off my porch. She said, Helen, please. The baby. I said, get off my porch or I am calling Sheriff Reeves. She did not leave right away. She walked down the steps slowly. At the bottom of the walk she turned and looked back at the door. She raised her voice the way people do when they want something said out loud whether anybody is listening or not. She said, he told me he would tell you after Christmas. He told me you would let him go. I did not answer. I watched her through the side window until she was past the maple tree at the corner of the lot. Then I picked up the phone. Reeves answered on the second ring. I said Lily Vance was just on my porch. She told me the baby is Daniel's. I want a court order for a paternity test. Today if you can. Reeves said I can have the order signed by 10. Why? I said because she sounded like a woman who knows it isn't and is hoping nobody will check. Reeves was quiet for a beat. She said, Helen, you may be right. I said I am usually right about the smaller things. It is the larger things I have been wrong about. I hung up. I walked into the kitchen. I turned the kettle on for tea I would not drink. The kettle whistled. I shut it off. Tim Hortons was almost empty at 4 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. The lunch crowd was gone. The high school crowd was not yet in. Mark Vance sat in the back booth by the window. He had bought 2 black coffees. He stood when I came in. He did not extend a hand. He sat back down. He slid his phone across the table. He said I monitored Lily for 6 months. Audio in our living room. She did not know. I should not have done it. I am turning the file in to Jim Cole tomorrow morning. I am giving you this version first. There is one call you need to hear. I picked up the phone. He had already pulled up the file. I pressed play. It was Lily's voice. I had heard her voice across my own kitchen table for 5 years. I had told her she was safe. I had given her my spare key. She said, Brad, listen. Daniel does not know. He is not going to know. He thinks it is his. We do this clean. He files for divorce, marries me, then we leave. 6 months. After Helen is gone and the insurance pays out, I am telling Daniel I lost the baby. By then we will be married. Then you and I. Yes. Yes, I know what I said. I know. Brad, this is the only way I get out of Mark and have money. Do you want this or not? Then meet me Tuesday. Same place. The recording ended. Mark watched my face the way ISTJ watches another ISTJ. No comment. No condolence. Just observation. I set the phone back on the table. He said the baby is Brad's. She was going to ride out Daniel's grief, marry him for the insurance money and the Caribbean property, then leave him for Brad once she had it. I said Daniel was using her. He said she was using him. I said neither of them planned for the third call to 911, to come from your wife's mother by Friday afternoon. He said that is correct. I said, Mark, how does this end for her now? He said conspiracy, fraud, obstruction. 6 to 8 years. Maybe more. I picked up my coffee. It was still hot. I drank. I said, then play it. Send the file to Cole tonight, not tomorrow. Mark nodded once. He pulled the phone back across the table. He started the upload. My own phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I took it out. Reeves, she said, Helen. I found Sarah. I need to come to your house this afternoon. I have files I do not want to discuss over the phone. 2 hours. I said 2 hours. I hung up. I looked back at Mark. He said Sarah. I said his first wife. I told him at the jail last Wednesday that I was going to find her. Reeves opened the case at 6 the next morning. They have been working for 9 days. Mark said, what do you think they found? I said what we already know. The same garage. The same kind of cold. The same insurance. 10 years earlier. He has done this once before and walked away from it. He has been carrying that piece of confidence inside him every day for 13 years. Mark said that is not the kind of confidence that comes off a man easily. I said it does not need to come off. It just needs to be entered as evidence. I stood up. I left $2 on the table for the second coffee Mark had bought me. I walked out into the snow. Reeves arrived at 6 in the evening with a banker's box and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the kitchen. She set the box on the coffee table in the living room. She unpacked it onto the rug in 3 rows. She did not narrate while she worked. When she finished, she sat back on her heels. She said Sarah Carlton Marsh, born in Bennington, Vermont in 1986, older sister Catherine 2 years apart. She met Daniel in 2008. She was 22. They married in March 2009. She tapped the second row of documents. Reeves said in 2012 he took out a life insurance policy on her. $900,000, universal life, beneficiary him as sole trustee of an irrevocable trust, same structure as yours. 8 months later she was prescribed sleeping pills by a physician named Donald Carberry. Carberry was Daniel's college roommate. He retired in 2017. He died of a stroke in 2021. She tapped the third row. Reeves said on the night of January 22, 2013, Sarah was found in the detached garage of their Camden home, cause of death hypothermia, sleeping pills in her system at therapeutic dose. The garage door manual release cord had not been examined because nobody at the scene thought to look at it. The original investigator was a deputy named Stuart Peavy. Peavy closed the case in 3 months. He retired 6 months later. He died in 2018. There were holes in his case file we caught immediately when we reopened. I said, what holes? She said the witness statements were not transcribed. The autopsy did not include a hair follicle screen. The insurance payout was processed in 11 days. Daniel sold the Camden house in May 2013 and moved to Belfast. I said I never heard her name. He said his 20s were a hard period he did not want to revisit. I respected that. Reeves said the forensic team is at the Camden property tomorrow. The house has been sold twice. The garage has not been renovated. We have a search warrant for the rail and the cord. I said the wire cutter. Reeves said the wire cutter recovered from your workbench is a Snap-on Model T28. Daniel purchased it in October 2012. The receipt is in the second row. If our forensic team finds tool marks on the Camden cord that match the marks on your cord, we have a serial pattern. Same tool, same hand, same crime, 10 years apart. I said, what does that mean for him? Reeves said in Maine that adds up to life without parole. Period. I picked up the phone from the side table. I called Margaret. I said, Margaret, we are going to bench trial. Daniel will not survive a jury once Sarah's evidence is in. He will waive his jury within a week. Tell Cole to prepare for it. Margaret said agreed. I will call him tonight. I hung up. I looked at Reeves. I said, Catherine Carlton called me Sunday. I want her to be the first person told when forensic confirms the cutter match. Reeves said, you have my word. She started packing the box. She did not rush. When she had it all back in order, she stood up. At the door she paused. She said, Helen, he has been getting away with this for 13 years. You stopped him at 3 weeks. Hold on to that the way he held on to the other thing. She let herself out. I locked the door behind her. Sandra Vance's farmhouse sat on 6 acres outside town. The driveway was gravel under snow. Joanne parked at the end of it because I asked her to. I walked the rest of the way alone. Sandra opened the door. She looked at me the way mothers look when they already know. She said she does not want to see you. I said, Sandra, I am not asking permission. One thing. Then I leave. She stepped aside. Lily was at the kitchen table. Her hands were on her stomach. She stood when she saw me come in. She said, you cannot be here. I set my phone on the kitchen table. I pressed play. Her own voice filled her mother's kitchen. The call to Brad. Sandra froze in the doorway. The recording ended. I said, Cole has the file. Mark turned it in last night. They are also testing the baby. You know what they will find, Lily said Helen. I said I am not here to forgive you. I am not here to negotiate. One sentence. Look at me. Tell me one true thing tonight and I leave. Did you know at any point that he was planning to kill me? Yes or no? She sat down. Her hand stayed on her stomach the whole time. She said, I thought he meant divorce. He said after the holidays. I said yes or no. She said yes, the week before the anniversary. He showed me the Caribbean tickets. He said she will not be a problem after. I told myself he meant divorce. But I knew. I think I knew. I picked up my phone. I said thank you. I walked out. Sandra caught my arm at the door. Her grip was hard. She said, Helen, please. The baby. I said the baby is Brad's, Sandra. The baby was always Brad's. Your daughter has been lying to everyone in her life, including you, including herself. I am sorry for what comes next. I am not changing it. I walked back down the gravel to Joanne's car. I sat in the passenger seat. I opened the Moleskine. I wrote one line. 3 women. Sarah, me, Lily. 2 of us survived. Differently. Mark Vance and I met 3 more times. The first was at the forensic accountant's office in Bangor in early March, where we walked through the firm's escrow records line by line. The second was at Margaret's office in late March, where Cole coordinated our trial testimony. The third was the day before the trial began in the courthouse witness preparation room. Each meeting lasted under an hour. We did not eat. We did not exchange unrelated information. The civil suit was filed on the 16th of February. The Sarah Marsh forensic team confirmed the wire cutter pattern match from Camden 2013 to Belfast 2026 on the 7th of March. Daniel waived his jury trial on the 29th of March. The bench trial began on the 12th of May. The courtroom on the second floor of the Knox County Superior Court was full by 8:30. I had been there since 7:45. I sat in the front row on the prosecution side. Joanne sat to my right. Catherine Carlton sat to my left. She had driven down from Vermont 2 days earlier and was staying in my guest room. Daniel was already at the defense table when I came in. He did not turn his head. Carl Robbins, his lawyer, leaned over and said something that Daniel did not respond to. Lily Vance sat at her own counsel table on the far side of the aisle, 8 months along, now wearing a dark blouse the prosecution had advised. She did not look at anyone. Judge Abigail Peterson entered at 9. She was 60 gray tall and she did not waste sentences. She had a reputation in 3 counties for finishing trials in half the time other judges took. Daniel had waived his jury at the end of March. His attorney had read the same forensic file we had and made the only correct decision available to him. Jim Cole rose for the prosecution. He spoke for 23 minutes. He laid the evidence chain in the order we had built it: the notebook from the garage, the ring footage from across the road, the 2 911 calls, the toxicology report on the multivitamins, the insurance upgrade 3 weeks before the incident, the draft obituary saved 7 days before the lock turned, the wire transfer to St. Lucia, the 2 airline tickets, the villa purchase agreement, the forensic accounting work that had pulled $612,000 out of 3 client trusts. Then he said one more sentence I had not expected. He said the defendant's father, Frank Marsh, age 72, deposed at Pinewood Nursing Home in Bangor on the 2nd of April 2026, testified that his son visited him in October 2025, and stated, quote, "My marriage is becoming a problem," unquote. The deposition is entered as Exhibit P. We submit this as evidence of premeditated intent stretching back at least 4 months prior to the attempted murder of Helen Marsh. I had not known about Frank's deposition. Margaret had asked me whether I wanted to read it before trial. I had told her no. I had not wanted to know what Daniel had said about me to a man who had spent 40 years drinking himself to the bottom of every bar in Knox County. Helen Marsh took the stand at 10:07. I read from the notebook. I read the way I had read story time at the library for 12 years. Time-stamped, slow, clear. I said, 23:43. He told me to come with him. 23:45. He pushed me onto the floor of the garage and locked the door. I remained in the garage for 5 hours and 19 minutes. The clock on the workbench was visible from the position where I sat. I counted minutes. I documented. I have submitted my notebook as Exhibit A. Robbins stood for cross-examination. He smiled the smile of a man who had practiced smiling in mirrors. He said, "Mrs. Marsh, isn't it true you and Mark Vance?" I interrupted him. I said 5 meetings total, 2 at Tim Hortons in Belfast, 1 at the forensic accountant's office in Bangor, 1 at my attorney's office, 1 at the courthouse witness preparation room, all public, all documented, all about evidence. There was no affair. The suggestion is recycled from a desperate playbook. Move on. Peterson Dry said the witness will let counsel finish his question. I said yes, Your Honor. Robbins said no further questions. I returned to my seat. Catherine reached over and took my hand. I let her. Mark Vance took the stand at 10:40. He played the ring footage on a screen the bailiff had set up at the front of the courtroom. 2 angles, both time-stamped. Daniel kicking the garage door shut from the outside, walking calmly back inside. Lily through the kitchen window switched from wine to tea holding the empty cup. Daniel returning, embracing her, kissing the place on her shoulder where the robe had slipped. The courtroom was silent. Mark played the second file. Lily's voice filled the room. She was speaking to Brad Holcomb on a Tuesday afternoon in October. She was telling him the baby was his. She was telling him Daniel did not know. She was telling him she would marry Daniel, wait 6 months for the insurance to pay, and then leave. Daniel turned his head for the first time since I had entered the courtroom. He looked at Lily. His face did the thing he had done in my kitchen at 5:02. The half-second. The repair. He learned in a public room in front of 40 people and a judge that the woman he had been planning to vanish into the Caribbean with had been planning to vanish into a different bed before the wire transfer cleared. Lily did not look back at him. The recording ended. Cole took the stand. He walked the court through the embezzlement. 3 client trust accounts. 14 months. $612,000. $480,000 wired to St. Lucia. The widows in Bar Harbor were named. The disabled adult in Camden was named. Cole did not look at Daniel. Then Cole said, "Your Honor," regarding the Sarah Marsh reopening. "We are introducing as Exhibit M, the Camden garage door, manual release cord, retrieved on the 7th of March, 2026. Expert testimony will establish the cord was severed in 2013 by the same toolwork pattern as the Belfast garage cord severed in January 2026. Same snap-on wire cutter model 28. The cutter was recovered from the Belfast garage workbench by forensic team on the 11th of February. The defendant purchased the cutter at Aubuchon Hardware in Camden in October 2012. Receipt entered as Exhibit N forensics, confirm match to both cuts." Robbins stood. "Objection. Speculation." Peterson said overruled. Expert testimony continues. Catherine Carlton took the stand last on day 1. She wore a navy dress her sister had bought her at a Bennington outlet 3 months before the death. She testified that Sarah's depression history had been overstated by Daniel to the original investigators in 2013. The sleeping pills found in Sarah's system had been prescribed by a friend of Daniel's, a physician now retired, who had not properly examined Sarah. Sarah had never used the garage at the Camden house, and had been afraid of cold spaces since childhood. Daniel did not look at Catherine while she spoke. He looked at his own hands on the table. Cole said the state rests. Peterson said court is in recess until 0900 Monday. The judge took 8 days. She came back on a Wednesday morning. The courtroom was fuller than the first day. Catherine had stayed in Belfast through the deliberation, sleeping in my guest room, walking the harbor in the mornings with Joanne. We did not talk about the trial. We talked about books. Peterson entered at 9 on the dot. She did not sit. She read the verdict standing up the way she did when she wanted the court to feel the weight before they heard the words. She said, "Defendant Daniel Charles Marsh." She said on the count of first-degree murder of Sarah Carlton Marsh in 2013, guilty. She said on the count of first-degree attempted murder of Helen Mary Marsh in 2026, guilty. She said on the count of insurance fraud, 2 counts, guilty. She said on the count of administering poison with intent to harm, guilty. She said on the count of embezzlement of client trust funds, 3 counts, guilty. She said sentencing. The defendant is hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole for the murder of Sarah Carlton Marsh, concurrent with additional consecutive sentences totaling 68 years for the secondary counts. Defendant will serve at the Maine State Prison in Warren. Custody is immediate. Daniel did not move. He looked at his hands. The bailiffs came around the table. They cuffed him. They walked him out the side door. He went without resistance. Peterson continued. She said, "Defendant Lily Ann Vance. Pursuant to plea agreement, The court accepts the modified plea of conspiracy after the fact, fraud, and obstruction, she said, sentencing. 6 years state correctional facility parole eligible at $300,000 restitution to victim Helen Marsh. Permanent revocation of Maine real estate license. 5 years probation post-release. Custody is immediate. Lily broke. She put her face in her hands and the bailiffs came around her table and walked her out. She did not look at me. I sat in the front row and did not stand for several minutes. Joanne held my elbow. Catherine held my other hand. Margaret turned around in the row behind us. Margaret said, "It's done." I said, "Civil suit. File Monday. Helen Marsh versus Daniel Marsh, individual capacity. 1.2 million for emotional damages, restitution beyond criminal, 5 years of medical monitoring for the poisoning. Helen Marsh versus Lily Vance, secondary. 250,000. Margaret said, "Done." I stood up. We walked out of the courtroom together. A reporter was waiting in the hall and asked me one question. I said, "I am a librarian. I have nothing to add to the record." I walked past her into the elevator. The doors closed. Catherine breathed out for what sounded like the first time in 13 years. That Saturday, I sat at the head of my own dining table. The original anniversary invitations had gone out in January for the 11th of February. I had quietly reissued them 4 weeks earlier with a different message. 10th anniversary celebration different than planned. Lunch at noon? RSVP if you can. Helen. 11 of the 18 original guests came. Joanne. My grandmother, 89, driven down from Rockland by her caregiver. 3 women from the library staff. 4 women from the Thursday book club. Mrs. Bishop, the neighbor who made the second 911 call. And Catherine, who had stayed in Belfast through the verdict and would drive back to Vermont after lunch. There was salad. There was soup. There was roast chicken. There were yellow tulips on the table because yellow tulips had been the first flower I had ever bought for myself at 22 in graduate school on a Tuesday I had not failed any test. I had bought them every Saturday since. Catherine stood first. She raised her glass. She said to Helen, "Who survived what my sister did not, and who made sure Sarah was not forgotten? I will spend the rest of my life grateful for you." I lifted my glass without standing. I said to Sarah, "Who deserved a witness she did not have? And to your family who waited 13 years for the truth. I am sorry it took this long." We drank. The doorbell rang. Daniel's cousin Marcia was on the porch. I had not invited her. She had come anyway. I let her in. Joanne brought her a plate. Marcia sat at the far end of the table for 10 minutes before she found the courage to speak. She said, "Helen, I am so sorry. I want to ask, is it true? About Sarah?" I set down my fork. I looked at her. I felt my mouth move into a shape it had not made in months. I said, "Daniel will spend the rest of his life learning how concrete feels at -22. The judge made sure of that. I will spend the rest of mine doing what he tried to take from me, eating lunch. With the people who came." The room went quiet. Then my grandmother, who had not laughed in 2 years, made a small sound at the back of her throat. Then Joanne. Then around the table, soft, real 11 women and 1 cousin. I picked up my fork. That night, I opened the Moleskine to a fresh page and wrote one entry. I wrote, "Today I sat at the head of my own table. The flowers were yellow. The soup was hot. There were 11 women who came because they wanted to. None of them were Daniel. None of them were Lily. I am 36 years old. I am a librarian in Belfast, Maine. I am alive." End of entry. Beginning of everything else. If you have stayed with Helen this far, thank you. Her story is one we hear in pieces every week from women like her. Married 12 years, married 20, married 30. Quiet women, careful women, women who keep records of what they spend on groceries and what they owe on the mortgage and what their husband's mother said at Thanksgiving in 1998. Women who write things down because writing things down is how they have always made sense of a world that does not always make sense back. You may not be a librarian, but you are a record keeper of something. Your children's school schedules, your parents' medications, your team's quarterly reports, the grocery list on the back of last week's church bulletin, the notes you take during a doctor's appointment when nobody else is listening hard enough. You are someone who pays attention. That is not a small thing. That is in fact the only thing that saved Helen Marsh's life that night on a concrete floor in Belfast, Maine. What almost killed her was not the cold. It was the assumption that noticing things was enough. That seeing the receipt that did not match the perfume that did not belong, the way a husband stopped meeting your eyes at breakfast for 1 month and then 6 months, and then a year, that noticing those things by themselves would protect you. They will not, Helen had noticed. For 8 months she had noticed. She told herself she was being unfair. She told herself love was complicated. She told herself 100 small things to keep one large thing from being true. The night her husband locked her in the garage was the night she stopped explaining away what she already knew. So here is what I want to ask you tonight, and I am asking because I think someone listening needs to hear the question out loud. Is there something you have been noticing in your own life that you have not yet written down? A pattern in someone close to you that you have been explaining away? A new bottle of vitamins you did not buy that appeared in your cabinet, and you decided not to think about? A change in the locks, a change in the bank statements, a change in the way someone touches your wrist when they want you to come with them to a room you did not plan to enter. You do not have to act today. You do not have to file anything or call anyone or pack a bag in the next hour, but you can open a notebook, tonight, on your kitchen table, date the page. Write down one thing you have noticed in the last 6 months that you have not let yourself say out loud. One thing. Then close the notebook and put it somewhere only you know about. The notebook that saved Helen in a freezing garage did not save her because it was clever. It saved her because it existed before she needed it. I want to hear from you in the comments below. Has there been a moment in your own life when noticing saved you or when not noticing cost you something you wish you still had? Have you ever watched a woman you loved go quiet in a marriage and wished you had said something then? You are not alone in this room tonight. There are thousands of women listening with you who know exactly what you mean. Tell me one true sentence. I will be reading every one.